We keep hearing this phrase, data is the new oil. And yeah, it might sound a bit like a buzzword, but let's actually dig into that for a second.
Okay.
Think about crude oil, right? Pulled from the earth, it's valuable, sure, but it's messy, not really useful like that.
Not in its raw state.
Exactly. It needs this huge refining process to become, gasoline or plastics or whatever. And that's really the core of what we're talking about with data today.
That's a really a powerful analogy, actually, because it highlights that essential transformation that has to happen. Raw data, it's just like crude oil. There's tons of it, but it's often chaotic.
Right.
It's the process, the cleaning, structuring, analyzing. That's what unlocks its real potential.
Precisely. And that brings us neatly to our deep dive today. We've got this really insightful C-suite guide. It's from CXOworlds, pretty fresh, May 13th, 2025, all about data strategy. So our mission, really, for you, the listener, is pretty simple, but I think crucial. We want to pull out the most vital knowledge here, the actionable stuff that helps you think strategically about data.
Cutting through the noise.
Yeah, exactly. We're not going to get bogged down in super technical details. We want to focus on what really matters at that strategic leadership level.
And what's great about this guide, I think, is it gives a clear roadmap for how organizations really should be viewing data, not just as some IT byproduct,
Right.
but as a core strategic asset. It's about building a system, a way to consistently turn that raw information into real business advantages.
Okay, so the guide kicks off by outlining what it called the data value chain. And this is where that oil analogy really clicks in again.
It really does. It breaks down the whole journey of data, mirroring the oil industry almost perfectly.
How so?
Well, it identifies 4 key stages. First, you've got extraction, which in the data world is collection, right? Gathering all that raw info. Then comes refinement. That's where the messy data gets cleaned, organized, structured.
Makes sense.
Then distribution follows how you store it, make it accessible. And finally, consumption. That's where the refined data actually gets used for analytics, for making decisions.
And when they talk about raw data, the picture it paints is just this overwhelming flood. Feeds from IoT devices, CRM systems pumping out info, social media chatter, financial records. It sounds almost chaotic.
Chaotic is a good word.
Yeah.
Or untamable, like you said earlier.
Yeah.
It's this deluge from all over the place, different formats, different quality levels.
Yeah.
Without a proper process, it's like trying to, drink from a fire hose. That refinement stage is where you bring some order to it all.
And that refinement, the guide really stresses this, is the key to unlocking the real power. It's what enables, intelligent automation systems learning on their own.
Predictive analytics, too.
Predictive analytics, yeah. Seeing what's coming and truly personalized customer experiences. It's taking that thick black crude and turning it into, jet fuel.
The impact is huge, right? On innovation, on just making smarter choices. And the guide makes this critical point. They call it the C-suite imperative.
Okay, what's that?
It means this isn't just for the IT folks anymore. Top leadership, the C-suite, that data is fundamental, a strategic asset.
So it needs to be a boardroom thing.
Exactly. Woven into how the whole organization thinks. What are some real-world examples you've seen where that's clearly happening, where data thinking is right at the top?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, you think of companies like Amazon, right? Everything they do seems driven by customer data recommendations, logistics, everything.
Totally.
Or Netflix, how they use viewing data to decide what shows to make. It's clearly not just a tech function there. It's their core strategy, driven from the very top.
And conversely,
yeah, we've all seen companies drowning in data, but seemingly have no clue what to do with it. And I bet that often comes down to a lack of that C-suite focus you mentioned.
absolutely. So if treating data strategically is this big imperative, what are the actual steps? How do you do it? The guide lays out 5 key pillars for successful strategy.
Okay, 5 pillars. Let's break them down. What's the first one?
Pillar 1, data governance. Now, I know it might sound a bit dry, maybe even bureaucratic. Is that fair?
It can sound that way, definitely. But think about the flip side. What happens without good governance? You get bad data leading to bad decisions.
Security breaches.
Security breaches, yeah. Lost customer trust, compliance failures, big fines. Suddenly, governance sounds pretty vital, right? It's basically setting the rules of the road for your data. The guide mentions things like GDPR, CCPA, those privacy regulations, as key reasons why this is non-negotiable.
Exactly. It's like ensuring the quality, the integrity, the security, the compliance of your whole data refinery operation. So, practically, how do leaders make this happen?
Well, the guide gives a pretty clear tip here. Appoint a chief data officer, a CDO, or at the very least, give the CIO real cross-functional authority over data.
Right.
Someone needs to own it, setting the standards and forcing them across the board.
That makes a lot of sense. Without clear ownership, yeah, governance can just kind of fall through the cracks.
Okay.
Okay, pillar number 2, data architecture.
Right. This sounds like the nuts and bolts, the infrastructure.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
It's the backbone, the plumbing that makes everything else work. We're talking things like data lakes, storing vast amounts of raw stuff.
Okay.
Data warehouses more structured for specific analysis. And the data pipelines that, move the data between systems.
And the guide mentions cloud and hybrid models here.
Yeah, it highlights the flexibility you get with those. Scalability, too. It's about building an architecture that can grow and adapt as your data needs change, which they inevitably will.
So the leadership advice is basically invest in modern platforms. What does that mean for a leader, practically speaking?
It means getting away from those old, clunky, siloed systems, moving towards platforms that can handle data in real time, pull info from different places into one view, and let different tools talk to each other easily.
Future-proofing, essentially.
Exactly. Future-proofing your data capabilities.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got governance, we've got the architecture. Pillar 3 is data literacy.
This feels super important because you can have the best tech in the world, but if your people don't get how to use the data,
Then the whole investment is kind of pointless.
Right.
The guide makes this point really strongly. Success hinges on people across the entire organization, marketing, ops, HR, everyone being able to understand and use data insights.
it's about empowering them to make data-informed decisions, not just, going with their gut all the time.
Right. So how do you actually do that?
The leadership tip is pretty direct.
Yeah.
Launch training programs across the company and actively try to build a data-first culture.
A culture shift.
Yeah, it's not just giving people access, it's fostering this environment where using data in decisions is normal, expected, valued at all levels. Have you seen companies do that well?
Yeah.
Build that culture.
Yeah. A few things seem to work. One is having data champions within different teams, people who are the go-to, who advocate for using data.
Okay.
Another is making data really accessible and visual. User-friendly dashboards, tools that aren't intimidating for non-tech folks, lowering that barrier to entry.
Makes sense. Okay, moving to pillar 4. Advanced analytics and AI. This is where that refined data really starts doing the heavy lifting, yeah.
Absolutely. This is where you take that clean, structured data and apply the sophisticated tools, AI, machine learning, what the guide calls decision intelligence.
Decision intelligence.
Yeah, basically using AI to not just find insights, but to help automate or augment the actual decision-making. And these technologies, they unlock some seriously powerful capabilities, things that just weren't possible before.
Like what? What examples do they give?
Things like predictive maintenance, knowing when equipment might fail before it does, or churn modeling, figuring out which customers might be about to leave. Fraud detection, too.
Wow, okay. Those all sound like they have a pretty direct impact on the bottom line. So if a company wants to get started with this advanced stuff, where'd they begin? It sounds complex.
The advice here is actually quite practical. Start small. Use pilot projects. Pick a specific high-impact business problem where analytics could really help.
Prove the value first.
Exactly. Prove it works, show the value, then scale up the things that are successful. Don't try to boil the ocean all at once.
Right. Good advice. Okay, and the 5th and final pillar.
Pillar 5, monetization models. This is where the guide talks about how businesses can actually make money directly from their data.
Okay, beyond just internal efficiencies.
Yeah, exactly. So improving internal stuff saves money indirectly. That's one way. But this is also about creating totally new revenue streams, maybe selling data insights or offering data as a service to partners or customers.
Data as a service, okay.
Right. And the leadership tip here is to think creatively. Look for partnerships, maybe build platform models where data isn't just supporting the product, it is part of the product.
So really shifting how you even perceive your data, not just as an internal tool, but potentially as a valuable commodity itself.
Precisely. Recognizing that the data you've collected and refined might actually be quite valuable to someone else. Now, even if you get these 5 pillars right, The guide also warns about some common pitfalls, traps to avoid.
Okay, these sound important too. What's a major one?
One big one is siloed data. We touched on this a bit with architecture, but it's worth stressing.
Why is it such a problem?
Well, it's when different departments just hoard their own data, right? Marketing has its data, sales has theirs, ops has theirs, and nobody shares or integrates it.
Right.
It leads to this fragmented view, especially of the customer. You get duplicated effort, missed opportunities. You just can't see the whole picture if the pieces are locked in different boxes.
Yeah, you can't connect the dots. Makes perfect sense. What's another common mistake?
Technology first thinking. This is a classic trap. Getting excited about the latest platform, the newest tool.
The shiny new gadget.
Exactly. Before you've even figured out what business problem you're trying to solve or what your actual strategy is, the guide is clear. Tech enables the strategy. It isn't the strategy.
Define the why before the what or how.
Precisely. And the last big pitfall they mention is, well, it's ethics and security.
Hugely important today.
Absolutely critical. Misusing data, or worse, having a breach. The fallout is massive.
Right.
Not just fines, but the damage to trust, to your brand's reputation. It can be catastrophic. Ethics has to be baked in from the start.
Okay, so looking ahead then, the guide talks about needing data strategies to be adaptable, resilient. Why is that so critical now?
Because everything is changing so fast. Data volumes are just exploding. New regulations pop up all the time. AI is evolving like crazy. Customer expectations shift.
Right.
A static strategy, something you set and forget. It'll be obsolete almost immediately. You need built-in flexibility, the ability to learn and adjust as you go.
So to kind of bring this home, the guide has these key questions for the C-suite. I think they're great questions for any leader listening. First one, are we collecting the right data?
Yeah, fundamental. Not just more data, but the right data. The data that actually drives your goals, gives you real insights. Are you being strategic about collection?
Second question, can we trust the data we use? Which really loops back to governance, doesn't it?
It does. Quality, integrity. If you can't trust the data, how can you trust the decisions based on it? It introduces so much risk.
Third, is our organization truly data-driven or just data busy? I like that distinction.
It's a great one. Lots of organizations are swimming in data, running reports, looking busy.
What?
But are they actually using it to change how they operate, to make better strategic choices? Big difference.
Huge difference. And the last one, how are we safeguarding data as a strategic and ethical asset?
Right. Brings together the security, the responsibility, the value. It's not just about making money from it, but protecting it properly and using it responsibly. That trust element again.
So wrapping this up, after diving into this CXOworlds guide, the main message really reinforces where we started, doesn't it? Data is the new oil.
It really is.
But its power, its transformative potential, it's not in the raw stuff. It's absolutely in the refinement, the strategy, the application.
Couldn't agree more. And for leaders, for the C-suite, the takeaway isn't necessarily become a data scientist. It's about setting the vision.
Right.
Funding the infrastructure, fostering that data literate culture we talked about, demanding real business outcomes from it all, owning the strategy.
Because when data gets that kind of top-level priority, that's when competitive advantage stops being just like a hope. It becomes measurable, repeatable, scalable.
Exactly. It moves from being just potential to being a real, tangible driver of success. Sustainable success.
So as you, our listener, think about all this, going back to that oil analogy one last time, here's maybe a final thought to chew on. Given how much we rely on data now, like we rely on oil, what are the potential, maybe less obvious environmental impacts, the unintended consequences of this data flood? And how can we start thinking proactively about mitigating those? Something to consider as we all navigate this data-driven future.